Chapter 90, The Second Oblatum 2/2. Translator, Sarah. Hu Huijing continued on, without catching a breath. Sister Liu is a talent in both the technological and management fields. The company brought her over with a high price, and I heard that her background is very complicated. It's not that no one has tried to flirt with her before, but eventually, they all return dejected and depressed. Luo Nan could salvage some information regarding Yinle from Hu Huiying's loose lips, and this information could be compared to what he already knew through the Wraith sign. However, Hu Huiying changed the subject very quickly, eager to take Luo Nan to know the type that was relatively easier to get. To this, Luo Nan responded by wearing his specialized tactical helmet, peripheral, effectively shutting out all outside noise and information. The default selection of the tactical helmet was enhanced reality mode. This was because the inner section of the VIP tournament room was designed with the popular starship layout. When this was combined with a little AR technology, it provided a relatively good experience in terms of immersion. However, very quickly, Luo Nan had a bit of the immersion broken. The tactical helmet gradually affected his five senses, helping to further enhance the quality of his experience. However, this effect stimulated Luo Nan's mental senses. As his five senses were tricked, his all-encompassing senses began to take over everything. Illusory and reality intertwined, but eventually, reality prevailed. Under the clairvoyance of his mental senses, the lighting effects were all revealed. They could no longer be described as a reality. Luo Nan was a bit annoyed. He had not considered this problem in advance. If it continued on this way, then he would be totally cut off from virtual reality in the future. Hu Huiying and the two guides could not even begin to understand what Luo Nan was feeling. After routinely asking him a few questions regarding his feelings, they quietly left and did their own thing in order to not disrupt Luo Nan's immersion experience. They did not know that Luo Nan was watching them with his mental senses, that Luo Nan knew their intentions. The long-haired guide left first. Meanwhile, the one with short hair flirted with Hu Huijing for a bit before leaving with a laugh. Hu Huijing was aroused, but he couldn't take it out on Luo Nan. He could only go to the resting area to find a place to sleep, whilst laughing and cursing. However, he quickly received a call. It was most likely from one of his fair-weather friends, urging him to join them. After rejecting them a few times and failing, he got up in annoyance and quietly left the room. Like this, Luo Nan was the only person left in the entire VIP room to do his boring test. However, after a few failed attempts, he eventually lost all patience. He took off his tactical helmet and left the top-grade enclosed maglev chamber in a daze. This couldn't be right. If it was just for regular people, then it would be fine. However, according to Bai Xinyan and Octopus Bro, the society had clearly participated in the project. There were plenty of mentally enhanced like him in the society, and if all of them had the same immersion experience, wouldn't that turn the Frost River waterway into a joke? Luo Nan realized that he might be doing something wrong if he were to follow this logic. He quickly looked down to his wristband to find the fine print regarding his temporary privilege he had gotten from the society. He dropped his hand. As expected, the temporary privileges system startup had not been complete. There was also a notification that displayed his location as Frost River number 3. He should have known earlier. The privileges that Bai Xinyan had granted him were obviously incompatible with the reality system. Maybe they weren't even from the same data link. I should have said something earlier. However, the second oblatum was there. Am I overthinking things? Luo Nan felt that he had done a lot of unnecessary things. Whether it be due to his lack of social experience or because he was too guarded, sometimes he would make things complicated. He thought back to a while ago and how he was being all mysterious. He had asked the two guides keep his secret. Now that he needed to ask them for help, he had to embarrass himself all over again. Luo Nan couldn't go back to the past, so he could only shake his head as he made his way out, still wearing his tactical helmet. Just as he was about to step out, he remembered that the VIP room had a call service. He rolled his eyes, but right at this moment, his wristband system notification finally showed that the Frost River number 3, that he had spent a long time looking for, had finally appeared within the boundaries for signal connection. Would you like to activate? Luo Nan was silent for a moment, then selected yes. A soft sound rang out in front of Luo Nan, and the door to a room automatically opened. The insides of the room was pitch black, but the automatic lights turned on immediately. Luo Nan walked towards the door, and it closed automatically after he walked through, effectively separating the inside from the outside. He momentarily felt some regret. He had come in uprightly for a body test. Since when did he begin to sneak around? As the door closed, his wristband vibrated, and the data connection and system boot had fully activated. A very conventional-looking female virtual image appeared before his eyes as a projection. At least it was one that Luo Nan found familiar. Hello, Explorer Luo Nan. Welcome to a whole new adventure. I am your guide, Nina. As per the Explorer manual, please enter the scanning area to be allocated with the appropriate equipment. Now the start guide commences. Luo Nan was certain that either the room or the privilege that Bai Xinyan had given him had locked the game items. He was not given him the option of choosing. This was different from his experiences back in the VIP room. It was all right though. Luo Nan followed the guide's instructions and entered the scanning area. It would be the third time tonight. The scanning this time was much more meticulous than the first 2 times and thus took longer. It had even required him to be compared with a demo video, so from time to time he had to do a series of movements. Without a doubt, this was much more professional. Luo Nan could feel that the combat clothes he was wearing were undergoing minor amendments according to his movements, making him feel more comfortable. Could this mean he needed to wear the helmet that he had discarded to the side? Just as he thought about this, the helmet emitted a red light. The virtual guide, Nina, spoke out in a gentle voice. Explorer Luo Nan, the system has confirmed that the tactical helmet that you have right now is incompatible with the requirements for adventuring and needs to be exchanged. Please follow the guide and undergo data binding for the new helmet. At the same time, an automatic robotic platform spun around, handing a new tactical helmet to Luo Nan. Luo Nan grabbed it and looked over it. On the surface, it did not seem too different from the one he wore before. He shook his head and put on the new helmet. However, the interface that followed caused him to be a bit surprised. The interface was pitch black, with only a single speck of white light directly in front of him. The system boot requested for him to concentrate and focus on the light, and Luo Nan naturally complied. After that, the speck of light divided, with one becoming 2 and then 4. They spread out and quickly moved to places that were out of his line of sight. Nonetheless, the system boot still requested for him to lock on the ever-increasing specks of light. A normal person would most likely have been confused. However, since Luo Nan had mastered an all-encompassing mental sense, This activity was simply a piece of cake. Luo Nan naturally slipped into the plane of mental awareness from basic visual perception. Oh right, this was a guide that was made especially for ability users. Luo Nan came to this sudden realization. The speck of light had divided into a total of more than 360 specks, distributed across all areas. Luo Nan had locked onto every single one of them. The lights then came together again directly above his head and began to cram itself into his brain. Luo Nan's mental senses automatically cut inside. Numerous light spots suddenly burst out in front of his eyes and intertwined with each other. Once it had settled down, Luo Nan realized that he had already entered a starship, and the gate that had just been opened stood before him. A corridor made from metal stretched out in front of him. After hesitating for a while, Luo Nan stretched out his hand to open the touch-activated alloy door. He saw that he was wearing gloves, and the hard feedback he felt through them was very realistic way. The wall that separated fantasy and reality shattered in that instant. Chapter 91, Control Ability 1/2. On the east coast of Xia City was a dangerous section of the winding Huanhai Highway. Past the protective railings of the highway was a steep cliff. Fine mist-like rain drizzled under the darkness of the sky, erasing the boundary between the cliff and the sky. This Huanhai Highway was the first highway installed with magnetic pavement, a Class 1 highway. At first, it was just a technological implementation, but it gradually turned into the superior choice for high-speed street racing due to its classical location. Even though the weather was bad, the drivers who chased thrills did not care. Sports cars came rushing at lightning speeds one after another on the highway, their speeds easily exceeding 300 km/h under the effects of the maglev system. The headlights cut across the road like a long sword. It sliced apart the curtain of night and the misty rain, making the cliff glow with light and stand out from the dusky ocean sky. Bai Xinyan stood on the peak of the cliff. She looked at the ascending highway spiral for a few rotations before extending her gaze into the distance. The flying cars that moved like a hurricane on the highway were like fireflies going the wrong way as they gradually faded into the curtains of mist. Xia City still looks like the same. I can't see the difference between it and Los Angeles. The giant metropolises were constructed hastily as a measure against the terrible environment of the war's aftermath. It was hard to preserve the special characteristics of human culture. A high degree of homogeneity was natural and expected. It was because of this that such a tedious steel jungle, though seemingly varied, was actually a monotonous human structure. It is because everything is so monotonous that those of the gifted class deserve to be treated with preference. That is, from the perspective of having a diverse species. Bai Xinyan's hands were in the pockets of her jacket. She welcomed the ocean breeze blasting her face and strode out with a step. The fluttering fine rain solidified into fine ice crystals beneath her feet to bear her weight. Just like this, they would solidify, shatter, and solidify again to form a faintly visible long staircase of ice crystals. This lasted until she crossed several levels of the highway to arrive at the lower section of the cliff. There was not a trace in the void behind her. Right now, Bai Xinyan was on a protruding platform about 10 meters above sea level. There was enough space for 2 people to stand. Further down the platform was a recess that was over 3 meters deep and 2 meters high. One could see the traces of man-made cuts. Bai Xinyan didn't go inside. Her gaze swept across the recess and she saw an opened waterproof metal box inside. Clothes that belonged to a woman lay messily over it. They were already soaked by the fine rain blown in by the wind. A relic from my casual lifestyle. How many years has it been? I still haven't gotten rid of it. Bai Xinyan inched her gaze away. She stood on the platform that faced the ocean. Half of the ocean, skies rained like a screen into a sheet of limitless reaches. The ocean wind spurred and sprayed the rain onto her jacket, creating pitter-patter sounds. Nonetheless, the rain could not make her wet at all. Below the platform were piles of jagged rocks shaped like canine teeth. The tide slowly swelled, and thick white froth vaguely created lines atop the tide that swung back and forth. Bai Xinyan gazed at the surface of the ocean. After a moment, her lips turned into a slight smile. The rain that fell around her body transformed into fine ice crystals once again, dropping rapidly into the tide and the rocks and making rustling sounds. In a few breaths of time, the endlessly rocking ocean tide froth transformed into crystal shards of all sorts of shapes. The chill continued to endlessly permeate deeper into the ocean waters. Soon, the reef and the half-frozen tide merged together into a warped silhouette that was like the sinister face of a devil. 1, 2, 3. She counted to 3 in her mind. Suddenly, a clang was heard amongst the sounds of the ocean waves, the wind, and the rain. The sound came from far, far away. The devil face on the surface of the ocean suddenly tore and split, causing the reef to split as well. The ocean split in half, and a slender human figure broke through from the parted seas. She laughed with a series of loud ha-ha-s. Freezing, I'm freezing to death, freezing to death. Zhang Yingying rushed out from the surface of the water. Her red and black striped wetsuit displayed her nice figure very prominently. Despite this, a layer of floating ice hung from her body and pearls of ice had formed on her hair. She was messy and lacked standing, looking to be in a bit of a sorry situation. Her bare feet tapped against the wall of the slippery cliff, and she jumped vertically to fly onto the platform. The sharp aura that draped her body didn't dissipate. She cleaved through the rain, causing a hiss. Atop the platform, Bai Xinyan didn't avoid her. She faced the figure that had charged up here and laughed with open arms for a vigorous hug. The khaki jacket was flipped over, covering the two together. Bai Yan, white salt, Bai Yan. Zhang Yingying was extremely excited. She was itching to roll out from Bai Xinyan's embrace and get rid of the layer of ice droplets that clung to her. Bai Xinyan paid zero attention to this. She held the young woman tightly in her embrace, sticking her chin lightly onto the hair covered with beads of ice. She didn't talk, but she still had that subtle smile from the very start. When the excitement and energy of seeing old friends barely died down a little, Zhang Yingying pulled some distance. She looked at Bai Xinyan's expression and couldn't hold back from fiercely gritting out. "Oh my, you haven't changed at all. You didn't melt from spending all day in the lab." But when she truly came to, she lowered her head and saw that the chill on the surface of the ocean had yet to retreat. She swallowed her previous words back down her throat. "Wow. How did you do it? This kind of freezing air is already abnormal. You're not just an architect, right? Are you an extraordinary?" "I'm not on that level yet. This is just a little bit of skill. It works differently from your white rainbow. On the other hand, I haven't seen you in 3 years, and now you've suddenly been training quite seriously." Zhang Yingying rolled her eyes. Yep, I've made a fool out of myself. I need to save face." "Did you now?" Bai Xinyan rubbed her cheeks lightly against the young lady's tender and cool cheek. Zhang Yingying giggled, then she asked what Bai Xinyan's plans were. No matter how things are, you'll need to stay in Xia City for a month or so. What's your schedule like? Why don't you live with me? We can play every day to our heart's delight. I'm seeing my boss tomorrow morning. Then I'll be handling other matters. I have an appointment tonight too, but it's just some formalities. Having said this, Bai Xinyan's wristband vibrated. She glanced at it and nodded slightly. Quite a number of new people have been dug up by the society in recent years. This scout is quite decent. Scout, oh right, that fellow's your patient. Zhang Yingying eyeballs spun. Some thoughts had floated up in her mind. Bai Xinyan observed all of this. Once she was sure that the scout had hung up the phone, she conveniently explained the situation to Zhang Yingying. The precision of this person's mental senses is extremely impressive. His abilities must be precision-slanted, heading towards micro-observation. How did he get the nickname Scout? This person, well, he actually does have a bit of talent. Zhang Yingying blinked her eyes, feeling a bit baffled. You two haven't met, right? How can you tell? I relied on technology. Bai Xinyan shook her wrist, letting the data be projected out from the wristband. Zhang Yingying could only understand a portion of it, but she was able to grasp the relevant information. Frost River Waterway, that fellow has nerve damage and he hasn't awakened. Can he endure it? Tusk, is it worth it? To torment him like this? Bai Xinyan subtly smiled. A patient needs to rely on their own two legs to walk when undergoing treatment. One leg is confidence. The other leg is obedience. I'm just strengthening the latter element. Zhang Yingying's face was unreadable. Sometimes, this fellow is a bit naughty, but it shouldn't have started yet. Yeah, he's been good so far. I just want to make him more obedient. Yikes, you pervert. Chapter 91. Control Ability 2/2. Luo Nan stood at the entrance to the metal passageway. He was appreciating the blurred boundary between fantasy and reality when Nina's portrait appeared on his retinas. Explorer Luo Nan, for the sake of infiltrating the planet's defensive circle, you will need to execute another short-range jump. Please enter the jumping pod. This plot felt very familiar. Last time, Mohan had tricked him into coming here and experiencing it. Things were more or less the same now. Luo Nan walked into the opened metal passageway, and the lighting gradually dimmed. There was a control console shimmering with light at the end of the passageway. Dots of stars from the depths of space could be seen in the transparent ring-shaped window of the operating system. Behind the control console was a classical high-back starship chair. Luo Nan walked over and sat down. He followed Nina's guidance to calibrate the devices and amended the parameters on the control console one by one. Everything here aimed to help the player adapt to the virtual environment by reducing the influence of reality to the greatest degree. Luo Nan used his picky gaze to examine the sensation on his fingertips, the changes in the lighting, and the shifts in perspective. However, he found it hard to find a distinct whole. The level of this simulation was quite intense, and it had actually already exceeded the limit of the realities geared towards the public. In order to come here, someone must have guided him mentally ahead of time. Everything was all set. The window displayed some absolutely meaningless coordinates for an adventure area. Nina's voice rang once more. Please close your eyes and seize your balance. Endure the vertigo of the short hop. Begin the adventure. Luo Nan's body slightly trembled. A peculiar glowing whirlpool appeared in front of the jumping pod. The pod started and accelerated. Luo Nan was pushed back into his chair by the force of inertia, while the whole world began to spin and roll back and forth. Luo Nan instinctively closed his eyes. The noise of electromagnetics, the noise of machines in operation, and the cries of alarms further in the distance were all exceptionally clear. Another jolt immediately followed. The sensation of high-speed rotation suddenly faded away. The complete reversal of inertial force caused him to be suddenly flung outside. He was welcomed by the cold water of a river. A muffled boom rang out and water splashed everywhere. Just when he felt pain, a more serious chill penetrated into his bones. There was no doubt that this was a rough landing. Within the game that was Frost River Waterway, the moment of falling represented the complete conversion between reality and virtual. The overwhelming majority of the participants' senses were produced by the stimulation of electrical signals to the nervous system. Luo Nan's experience was more real than the vast majority of participants. When compared to the tragic experience from before, this reality was something that could be treasured. He opened his eyes and stood up from the river. His surroundings were still pitch dark, but a weak, lustrous light flickered in the corner of his vision. The waves of water were up past his knees. The flowing rate wasn't slow, and the water was cold enough to chill the bone. There were even fragmented ice floes on the surface that collided with his body, causing him a subtle sensation of pain. The communications device on his collar vibrated slightly at this moment. Nina's slightly urgent voice came through. Some messy background noises were mixed within the call, further embellishing the environment of this reality. Explorer Luo Nan, you have just experienced a failed short-range jump. Your combat clothes have been damaged to a certain extent. Please attentively look over the report. Please scout out the surrounding situation for the time being and send relevant information back to help us decide the next step and directions. Before her voice could fade away, the communications device rang with static noise. A bizarre and odd voice spoke. "Welcome to the Frost River Pub. Please follow the waterway forward. We've already prepared some fine liquor for our guests to warm up their bodies." Nina's voice cut back inside. "It looks like there are other people here. You can do a side adventure. From the information you've sent back, please take note that some odd material has been mixed into the water of the waterway. The water temperature is already below the freezing point. Please amply move your body to avoid being frozen solid." The challenge of Frost River Waterway began from this moment on. In accordance with the rules of Frost River Reality, the winner of the challenge will be taken to Frost River Reality to receive a prize. The winner's game ID would be recorded and entered into the global rankings. Only Luo Nan didn't know how the outcome of this ability user version would be like. Luo Nan followed the guidance lines from the tactical helmet. He went against the flow of the water and pressed on forward. The purpose of Frost River Waterway was to test the ability of the player's body to adapt to changes in a low-temperature environment. Luo Nan had tried this before, but at that time, he had retreated in defeat. He didn't have a real understanding of the inner details of the circumstances. He just knew that the length of the waterway was very indistinct. He had heard that it was 1,500 meters before, and he had also heard that it was 3,000 meters. Frost River Reality had never made the true data public, but it was super clear was that the waterway was split into 3 sections in total. In other words, 3 difficulties. The early stage began upon entering the waterway and was approximately 500 meters in length. This test aimed to see if one could maintain body activity under cold stimulation. The medium stage was from the 500 meters to the 1,000 meters mark. It involved diving underwater to discern underwater skills. The later stage didn't have a definite length. It involved skill at an extremely high level. It specialized in testing the limits of a person's survivability. Last time, Luo Nan could only persevere for 100 or so meters before he was unable to take it any longer. He was kicked into protected mode, and his performance was appropriately embarrassing. The overall trend of the Frost River waterway was to go downwards. After 10 meters, the depths of the icy waters would begin to gradually increase. Soon, the waters would go above his waist. The gurgling flow of the icy waters made it a difficult job for those inside to walk forward, especially the penetrating chill. The feeling of numbness made it easy for a situation to occur. Luo Nan took a deep breath. Last time he had walked in the Frost River waterway, it seemed that the icy waters had reached his waist in an instant. He had lost all feeling in the lower half of his body. This time, it looked like things were pretty much the same. This was unrelated to the quality of one's body, but rather something that was highly related to the sensitivity of one's nervous system. The only thing different was that last time Luo Nan was a bit ignorant. He was extremely sensitive to the stimulation, but he did not know where his sensitivity laid. Right now, he was able to clearly feel the external stimulation acting on the cold sensory receptors of his skin to form nerve impulses that entered his central nerves. They were conducted to the temperature regulation center of the hypothalamus. His clairvoyance over the state of his own body had already entered a level that was praiseworthy by ordinary people. Though it was taxing to use his near 110mm sensing precision to penetrate on the scale of human cells when it was combined with his personal awareness, he should be able to grasp an approximate outline. But this would require a great increase in the flow of necessary information to process. A feeling of weariness soon invaded him, and the temperature of his body rapidly reduced, sharply increasing his energy consumption rate. Then one of his legs grew weak, and he fell into the water. The protection from his helmet made it so that he didn't choke, but separated by a layer of armor was the torrential current bound with chunks of ice. They collided with him and made clanking sounds. The icy water flowed into his damaged combat clothes, causing a chill to penetrate deep inside. This excessive stimulation caused his blood to circulate. According to his body's instinct, his inner organs took precedence. His limbs quickly went numb, making him lose the ability to move. A giant chunk of ice suddenly collided against his head with a bang. His helmet became damaged, and icy water seeped inside. Luo Nan was choked to an inch of his life. He was seeing stars. His consciousness became a bit blurry. Nina seemed to have said something next to his ear, but he was already unable to hear it. When his consciousness recovered back to total clarity, Luo Nan had already returned to the high-back starship chair from before the jump. As expected, he had failed the Frost River Waterway Challenge. Chapter 92, Multiple Options 1/2. Luo Nan leaned back in his chair. His limbs were powerless for a time. When faced with the changing stimulation of the external world, his body still needed some time to adjust. A hologram was set up in front of his body at this time. Videos were playing back in the center region. Several different perspectives showed the details of his movements at the Frost River waterway. His very sorry state in them needed no further words. All sorts of digits and data appeared all around the playback videos. Most of it was jargon. Luo Nan did not quite understand it. Even if he did, he lacked something to compare it to. It was very hard for him to understand this event, which had been completely turned into data. In the end, he did not know what level this represented and whether he did excellent or poor. Luckily, he discovered that there was a simple summary at the lower center region of the hologram. The challenger's body is weak, but possesses remarkable sensing precision. He is a precision-slanted, mentally enhanced, but he lacks the appropriate information processing skill. He lacks control ability over his body and remains on an instinctual stage. Information processing skill, control ability. Luo Nan thought back to his recent experiences. He had received a lot of information, but he was barely able to accept it. All of his nerve impulses and relevant reactions still followed his body's functions to advance in a prescribed order. Indeed, the so-called control ability was out of the question. He was quite convinced by this evaluation. Obtaining information was one thing, processing and controlling it was another. Luo Nan knew that the control center for the body's temperature was located in the hypothalamus. He also knew of the relationships between the mutual inhibitions of the relevant control region, including the various neurotransmitters and neurons, as well as their characteristics. He also possessed an appropriate amount of soul strength that was sufficient enough to interfere with the material plane. He could give his nervous system sufficient stimulation. But Luo Nan really did not know how to control this. This wasn't something that could be understood just by thinking about it. If he were to truly give it a shot, how would he decide what the right steps should be? It must be known that the hypothalamus was an important region of the brain that regulated the activity of hormones and internal organs. The problem with a bad stimulation would not be just failing the challenge. He might even kill himself on the spot. Luo Nan sighed and watched a few replays of his sorry appearance before choosing to face the challenge again. Before all this, Bai Xinyan wanted him to try it a few extra times. He was given 2 hours of time, and only about a quarter of that time had passed now. He still had to practice. The problem was that the outcome did not change too greatly each time he entered the Frost River waterway. The icy cold water of the Frost River waterway was all right. The real headache was the rapid flow of water and the giant chunks of ice and other junk that came rushing down. Under the numbness caused by the cold, Luo Nan absolutely didn't have the leeway to dodge. He could only fail time after time. The depression in Luo Nan's mind was accumulating. He was not scared of failing, but he was gloomy about clearly knowing his problem and the feeling of powerlessness that came from the impossibility of fixing it. Repeating it a few times, he collapsed at the first 500 meters mark each time. Each time had the same problem. What was the point of continuing to try? This accumulation of emotions already caused his soul's strength to go a bit out of control. So Luo Nan just simply chose to log out. The sealed magnetic chamber opened up, and the high-back chair was restored to its original luxurious state. Luo Nan sat on the chair and was distracted for a time. He heavily smashed the armrest with his fist and ignored the system notifications. He took off his helmet so that he could take some good breaths of air. But the instant he took off his helmet, all the notification lights surrounding the high-back chair went out. The guide Nina disappeared without a trace, and the lights in the room lit up instead. The atmosphere from before was completely broken, and his wristband vibrated again with a system notification. You have spontaneously logged out of the system. Your temporary privileges have been revoked. Luo Nan was stunned for a moment. He looked at the time. He had not even reached half of the 2 hours period. He had just wanted to catch his breath just now. He never thought that the system would close on him so bluntly. This kind of privilege was far too deceptive. Thinking about it from another perspective, Miss Bai probably did not completely factor in the option of a halfway rest point for the user. From this perspective, Miss Bai's temperament might be dreadfully hard to deal with. A sense of alertness suddenly swelled in Luo Nan's heart, like that of a mischievous student facing a strict teacher. The most unfortunate thing of all was that this was his first assignment from his teacher. He had done very bad on it. Perhaps he had already thoroughly destroyed her first impressions of him. Luo Nan was a bit troubled, but it was too late for regrets now. His temporary privileges were no longer effective. The illumination of the lights clearly showed a sense of estrangement. He could only leave. The robotic platform swiveled over to his side at this time. The intent was to leave the special tactical helmet behind. Thinking about the huge difference in experience made Luo Nan really hate to leave. This also further increased the growing regret in his mind. Luo Nan hesitated for a moment. He did not return it for now and instead walked back to the scanning area. He picked up another helmet that was placed there. His hands held it in his grasp as he compared and compared. From the surface, he could not see much difference. If he had not entered Hu Huiying's VIP room first and had his first unsuccessful experience, Luo Nan probably would not have thought that the equipment was different and that the experience formed would be so greatly divergent. But since he found where the problem lay, why not use a bit of effort to thoroughly and clearly find out where the difference between the two helmets laid in the end? Luo Nan was unable to hold back his curiosity. He adjusted the precision of his senses to high, and his soul strength penetrated the helmet. The field of precision electronics was all Greek to him, but the structural design of the two helmets seemed to be identical. This gave him a standard of reference. This one comparison would really give him some good results. He compared one region after another using his mental senses, and he soon discovered that Frost River Helmet number 3 had a chipset installed in a compartment area stuck to the location above the forehead. The helmet he took from Hu Huiying's VIP room also had a similar compartment, but there wasn't a chipset there. It was very clear that this was where the difference lay. Luo Nan put on the tactical helmet once again, his consciousness penetrating inside. This time there wasn't a system boot, but the more things were like this, the more likely it was for the most basic things to appear. He noticed the flow of energy and information within the chip under the on state. Looking at the material structure, the scale of energy and information was smaller by several magnitudes when compared to human cells. But the sensitivity the soul had towards energy and information was clearly very high. His soul didn't need to interfere with the material plane. He was able to clearly perceive and read the energy and information. Thus, Luo Nan was able to perceive and examine the processing method of energy and information of the chipset within the Frost River Helmet number 3. It was a very familiar architecture. It was extremely familiar. Luo Nan did a brief recollection and was able to confirm the root of the familiar feeling. Jack the Dynamo Core, the Tower of Babel. Even though the operating mode over energy and information was cruder and more rigid in comparison, this sort of mode of information, exchange and transformation was undoubtedly displayed by the Tower of Babel structure by Jack that night. There was some link, even if this method was transplanted into a chip, making the structure that sustained the operation become greatly different. There was no essential difference over the operating modes of energy and information between the two. Ooh-wee, this really did come as a surprise. Chapter 92, Multiple Options 2/2. Part of the Dynamo Core's function was recreated. Luo Nan arrived at this conclusion and was more or less dumbfounded. He lacked a comprehensive understanding of the object that was the Dynamo Core. At most, he had inferred a few things from the conversation between Jack and Yan Yongbo. This sort of thing was likely a top-of-the-line item from the Apocalypse Laboratory. It possessed an overwhelming control over digital devices. It was a key technology to the fourth generation of burners and could be used on altered humans. Furthermore, it could completely break the boundary between an altered human and a burner by way of a special application. Such fine technology had suddenly appeared in a large public virtual amusement project that was Frost River Reality, and it had appeared in such a special link. Even if this was just a small section, even if the government, the military, the Ability User Society, and various tech companies were all involved, Luo Nan still found it hard to believe that this was just a coincidence of great minds thinking alike. Was this a repeated experiment hidden within this project? Or did the Apocalypse Laboratory have their hands in this project? Did the society know of these circumstances? A series of questions knocked at Luo Nan and left him dumbfounded. It looked like he had one foot in dirty water. Of course, as long as he was able to face reality, he would be able to get all that he desired. Luo Nan muttered in thought as he weighed the chipped helmet in his hands a few times. His eyes gradually lit up. Obviously, he would not be able to take this helmet with him, and he certainly would not be able to remove the chipset inside, but he had the perfect alternative. His own Dynamo Core, the external neuron. Luo Nan had never used his own Dynamo Core to establish a Tower of Babel. He was worried that his current body would not be able to sustain it, and that he would die just like Jack. However, Luo Nan had the peripherals of Frost River Reality now. By utilizing the Dynamo Core's ruling power over digital devices to combine the two, he would be able to rematerialize the immersive virtual experience meant for ability users. It should not be too big of a problem. The virtual experience was a small matter. If he could dig out some information on a deeper level, then that would be some great gains. Luo Nan could not hold back any longer. It was fine if he could not use Frost River No. 3. He could just switch to a different location. He immediately abandoned the chipped helmet and carried his original equipment out the door with large strides. Frost River No. 3 immediately closed behind him. It was impossible for him to reopen it. Luo Nan did not care. He walked hastily back to Hu Huiying's VIP room. The installations here were still active with not a soul in sight. Luo Nan took a deep breath as he walked to the high-back starship chair. He put on the helmet that lacked the key chipset and connected to the system. From the perspective of an ability user, this helmet was just a clumsy tool without the mental guide function of the chipset. It could not control the penetration of one's mental senses and made the resulting virtual scene quite laughable. But this time, Luo Nan was not impatient nor urgent. His intent subtly moved within the messy array of light and darkness. The external neuron, which had always been concealed in the center of his brain between the left and right thalamus regions, soundlessly extended and stabbed into the chip area of the helmet. It probed around a bit and automatically forked out structurally to connect with the empty interfaces. Energy and information converged and operated. The entire process was manifested clearly. There wasn't a big difference in the structure, but the emulated copy was more exquisite than the chipset by 100-fold or even 1,000-fold. The amount of energy and information it could process was also over 100-fold or even 1,000-fold. Luo Nan felt the helmet grow hot. Compared to the supreme processing power of the Dynamo Core, the helmet was somewhat unable to endure the energy. However, this was not a big problem. At this time, Luo Nan's mental senses no longer spread out. Instead, there was a direction to place his soul's strength. It was like the sensation he had when he had entrusted his soul's strength into the Dynamo Core after days of being extremely taxed. The previous Dynamo Core was completely empty inside, like a deep and silent hollow. However, there was now color and structure. Layers and layers were piled atop each other, growing all the more splendid as it gradually formed a world. Luo Nan's consciousness lingered within, quietly sensing the fine details. This kind of guide was much more intense than differentiating the dots of light, yet the guide was not like that of the chip, which was separated by a layer. Instead, his emotions were completely and thoroughly accessed and cast inside. What was going to happen? The instant this thought flashed by, his mind was completely immersed within. As if time was flowing backwards, when Luo Nan came to, he had returned to the jump pod and was facing the ring-shaped windows of the control console. The tightness of his combat clothes bound to him, the weight of his helmet, and the support of the high-back chair all passed through various sensors all over his body. They were fed back to his central nerves, and an indistinguishable scene that was between virtual and reality was interweaved together in front of his eyes. Luo Nan was brought completely into this fantastic world. There was not a system boot this time. Only two graphical options were there in the ring-shaped window before his eyes. Luo Nan's scalp went a bit numb the instant he saw the graphics. The right graphic was a simple sphere. The left graphic was something that he could not be more familiar with. The visualization diagram, the format pyramid. Perhaps his moment of daze was far too long, for the system eventually let out a sound. It was still Nina's crisp female voice. "Do you need the newbie guide?" "Yes." "Please select the active mode. 1 archetype mode, 2 free mode." On the ring-shaped window, the visualization diagram and the sphere lit up one after another after Nina's notification, indicating which one was archetype mode and which one was free mode. Archetype. Luo Nan felt somewhat uncomfortable, but the feeling of excitement that came from peeking into a giant secret bombarded heavily against his chest. He could feel threads of cold air pass through the fine gaps between his teeth. He could not help but lock his gaze right onto the diagram he knew all too well. "I choose archetype mode." The visualization diagram lit up and shifted into the center of his vision. Meanwhile, the sphere gradually faded away. At the same time, the deep and low voice of a certain man rang in his ears. "In a certain sense, every human is a mass of molecules assembled together. The living process of every human is the oxidation of this assembled mass of molecules. The human body is precisely in a burning state." Just hearing these words alone caused Luo Nan to feel an electric current run through and shake his spine. It was enough to cause his entire body to be covered in goosebumps. There was an instant where he almost jumped out of his chair, but a different force made him motionless. The deep and low male voice continued. "The burning of ordinary people is inefficient, be it generated, accumulated, or exploited. The burning is restricted to the structure of our bodies, affecting our lifespan, and through inheritance, it affects the existing form of our generations. But following the deep exploration of the secrets of life, humanity is no longer satisfied with such an inefficient mode. Humanity has endlessly tried to improve their muscles, bones, organs, genes, and consciousnesses. Traces of alteration technology has been left behind in each field, but it was all scattered and fragmented. This was until humanity selected a whole new structural system, taking these scattered and fragmented results and truly integrating them together. The visualization diagram enlarged in the center of Luo Nan's vision. Countless lines interweaved together to draw the outlines of bones, organs, nerves, and muscles. They joined together to form a complete human body that settled in the center of the visualization diagram. It sat majestically in the lotus position. This transcends human convention. This is the embodiment of a certain direction of evolution. This is the burner. Chapter 93, Archetype Flame 1/2. Translator Strivon. An explosion of water rang forth. Luo Nan had experienced yet another failed relay, re-entering the Frost River waterway. The rapid-flowing water and fragments were above his body, bringing a bone-chilling sensation. Luo Nan didn't stand up immediately. Instead, he submerged his head, which was wearing the tactical helmet, underwater. He used the cold, flowing rapids to clear up his brain. When he had decided to substitute the Dynamo Core for the chipset and connect to the frozen star system of Frost River reality, he had very much expected to dig up information of this degree. Originally, with the temporary privilege granted by Bai Xinyan, he was unable to access to the core of this virtual reality project. It was only after the feelers of the external neuron touched upon the lowest level of the frozen star system that he was able to get a glimpse at these deep mysteries. Simulating the burner's simulator. Frost River reality, beloved by youths, even had this function. All right, this was still within the realm of reason. The government and the army were involved, and this was a large project about virtual reality. Like borrowing the hen to lay an egg, they had made a few model constructions, combat simulations, and similar work. Things couldn't be more normal. This kind of optimization towards ability users, such as burners, really made one's imagination go wild. Even the technological methods employed were amazing. Luo Nan was already super familiar with the leading story at this time, so he had skipped it by habit when it started playing again. He had not been paying much attention. He was just mulling over his current situation, wanting to see what was different in the end. Suddenly, Nina's notification streaked past his ear. Please pay attention to the internal energy reserves of the archetype format, appropriately deploy them, and avoid being frozen solid. The lines changed. Luo Nan had a sudden realization. He still remembered that Nina's guide sequence started by notifying that the combat suit had been damaged, noting the anomalies of the waterway. And then there was the line, please amply move your body to avoid being frozen solid. What the heck was this internal energy reserves that suddenly popped up? His thoughts arose and the scenery cast on his retina changed. On the lower left corner, a thick white U-shaped symbol appeared, shining brightly. It captured Luo Nan's attention. When Luo Nan's gaze was cast onto the U-shaped symbol, the deep and low background commentary voice spoke once again. By drawing in the archetype format, the burner transcends the burning mechanism that is conventionally inefficient. The burner fully transforms and utilizes the internal energy of the human body and obtains even higher applicational efficiency. The U-shaped symbol was changing as the commentary sounded. It turned from an initial white color to red, orange, green, blue, purple, in that order. 5 colors in total. Then it returned to its initial color, white. During this time, the coloration that filled the U-shaped symbol had its water level endlessly increase. Direct observation of this image revealed crucial information. Luo Nan took in the relevant words and quickly understood the meaning behind them. Burners could utilize the archetype format to continuously transform, accumulate, and increase the internal energy of the human body. The water levels of the U-shaped symbol was the available internal energy reserve, and its changing spectrum of color represented the efficiency of that form of energy from low to high. There were 6 levels in total. It was very clear that the key factor for determining the depths of ability in a burner, in a situation where the internal energy reserves were extremely close, laid in the energy form. The body's natural generation of chemical energy and the muscular mechanical energy of a 100-kilogram built man was laughable when compared to the antimatter annihilation reaction produced from a strand of hair from a baby. Of course, this comparison itself was a joke. This was where the mighty secret of the burner lay, or at least a crucial portion of it. Luo Nan straightened up. The icy cold flow of water continued to scour against his body, causing his body temperature to rapidly plunge. He did not move, instead, he waited. Where are the internal energy reserves? Where is the archetype format? Even though he was inside a game, Luo Nan did not believe that he was simply playing a game. The so-called internal energy reserves, the archetype format, and even the digitized symbol should not be concepts that were just installed in the game. There had to be some sort of concrete, touchable experience. Though he had not entered here in a very formal way, he had used the Dynamo Core to gain access. An odd sound started ringing out. The image shown on his retina and the background commentary in his ears turned a bit fuzzy. Clearly, they were being affected by some strong interference. The disturbance passed after a second or two. The background commentary was fine and Nina, the system guide, was fine too. There were no problems afterwards. There was only the singing voice of the Frost River pub that was transmitted over from the distance via radio waves. Mixing into the noise towards Luo Nan in the waterway, a voice called out. I used the memory of fine liquor to cast up a flame, letting her freeze in the ice. Amidst the cold and intermittent singing voice, Luo Nan could feel a slight vibration just above his forehead. The tingling sensation started from the top and moved down, spreading out layer by layer from the top of his head to his shoulders and neck, chest and back, waist and abdominals, legs, and finally the soles of his feet. During this time, detailed feedback was transmitted through his brain, his spinal cord, his 12 cranial nerves, and even his 31 spinal nerves. This spurred his near 1,000 bones and muscles, the hundreds of millions of capillaries, and the tissues of his entire body to form an innumerable stream of information that was transmitted back to his brain. To differentiate these signals one after another and clarify the meanings accumulated within them may not be possible for Luo Nan, even after his brain underwent a transformation into a supercomputer. But when these signals swarmed over, they circled around the external neuron, and the external neuron instantly differentiated them into a marvelous order. Some were stronger, some were weaker, some were more hurried, some were more at ease. Each seemed to be in their respective and definite positions, arranged in order of density. It was like the different shades and shadows of lines when drawing. They instantly formed a profound structural whole that was directly observed. Next, Luo Nan's consciousness naturally sprouted, directly embedding itself into the central core of balance in the dominant structure. Driven by a wonderful thought, Luo Nan sat back into the water and adopted the full lotus position, fixing his entire body to the riverbed. The two sides from the top of his head to his shoulders, elbows, and knees formed two perfectly straight diagonal lines that merged with the riverbed and formed a stable pyramid structure. The rapidly scouring flow of water instantly clashed with his face. The external and powerful pressure was conducted into him layer by layer and was transformed into energy and information that conducted through the system of millions and millions of nerves, tissues, and capillaries. They ultimately formed a weak yet perfect stimulation that was tossed into the central core where Luo Nan's consciousness lay. It was like a spark being tossed into a deep pool of kerosene. Boom! The flames danced and soared, seemingly engulfing everything. Of course, this wasn't a real fire. This could only be described as the pouring of his consciousness, an expansion of his perception. However, when Luo Nan's consciousness shifted away from his feelings and returned to a normal perception, there was clearly now a warming force within his lower belly. It radiated out all around, and at this time, the water level of the U-shaped symbol on his retina rapidly plummeted. It kept falling until it reached the lower one-third mark. Only then did the downward trend barely stop, yet the symbol continued to shake endlessly. The trend did not look good, but Luo Nan was able to feel the matching real sensations and acuities synchronized within his body. Chapter 93, Archetype Flame 2/2. Translator Strivon. Luo Nan opened his eyes, but still maintained his sitting position. The penetratingly cold river brought chunks of ice to endlessly batter against his chest. Occasionally, there seemed to be a shard that could penetrate the defenses of his tactical helmet and directly injure his face. The ice also seemed to be mocking him in low voices. "Ha, what's appeared within your body? What's dancing within?" What appeared was the archetype format. What danced was the format of fire. Luo Nan had expected this even before he had jumped off the high-back starship chair. He was eagerly awaiting these results. He absolutely would have refused this opportunity a week or two ago, perhaps due to feelings of pride. But through the format, my heart's a prison. Through subduing the human-faced arachnid, through establishing the format pyramid, through the out-of-body state, and through contemplation over reality and fantasy, he had experienced many different trains of thought. He was very different from before. Only when one planted their feet and stood firmly could they hold a calm and objective attitude when facing problems on the plane of reality. Luo Nan was already convinced that the formatting theory he had inherited really did have practical results, and that it was not in the least bit inferior to the archetype format. In fact, it was even more amazing on the mental plane. However, he conceded that the archetype format's development and application in the field of the human body's potential had been conducted to an extremely deep level. They had already established a relatively complete systematic standard that was able to successfully appear in a virtual reality system. This was extremely extraordinary. What he wanted to do now was to dig deeper into the mysteries within, from the archetype format itself to the source and technology of the simulated copy. He would not let a single hair escape his grasp. The water level of the U-shaped symbol continued to shake and drop, showing Luo Nan that his internal energy reserves were still being used up. However, this sort of consumption had already displayed its value. Right now in Luo Nan's lower abdominals was a real sensation of heat manifested from his internal energy. It forced down the chill and continued to circle around his lower abdominals, making his inner organs slightly warm. Luo Nan stood up and moved his limbs a bit. The effects of the internal energy grew clearer under this movement. There was now an axis for the energy of his entire body. Although the heat was constantly being worn away, a portion of it operated and flowed via the axis control. It flowed from his upper limbs to his lower limbs, from areas of high heat to areas of low heat. Even though the efficiency was all over the place, Luo Nan was still able to maintain the normal functions of his body. Luo Nan could feel something like an armor formed from the support of the heat upon the outer layer of his skin. What used to be a bone-chilling cold became somewhat bearable. Yes, this is it. This was none other than the results of being able to control his nervous system. He had been looking for this during his repeated attempts in Frost River Room Number 3. Previously, he was unable to grasp it when faced with the complex structure of the hypothalamus and had given up. But now, through his internal energy, through the archetype format, everything was accomplished naturally and easily. If Luo Nan were to look at it from an observer's point of view, he would be able to sense the stimulated area of the two front and back sides of the hypothalamus and the thermoreceptors that covered his entire body. Through a high degree of conformity, they coordinately stimulated every location, top and bottom, inside and out. All of his body was used to transport this heat all around, forming a fine heat network that covered his entire body. The involving neurons, blood vessels, muscle fibers, and even fine and hidden conductive paths were controlled in a fashion that was 1,000 times more complicated than Luo Nan expected. No, 10,000. However, this control method was not mentally taxing at all. He just spurred his thoughts and issued a not-so-clear instruction. The archetype format that was powered by his internal energy reserves had completed everything for him. Luo Nan began to walk forward with large strides. The heat armor displayed its effects very prominently. Even though the water level of the waterway was gradually rising, and the contact of the icy water with his body grew greater and greater, the response of his body actually grew quicker. He could effortlessly avoid the large chunks of ice flow that was rushing down the watery rapids. He could also sense the unsteady undercurrent below and was able to control his body in time and maintain his balance. Soon he had walked over 300 meters, a distance that far exceeded his previous record. It really is important to have good software, thought Luo Nan with sudden emotion. Because of the existence of the archetype format, he did not need to manipulate his complicated nervous system directly. Instead, through his internal energy, he achieved a method of manipulation that even an idiot could do. He could focus more of his energy towards responding to external stimuli. Luo Nan's self-format was like this as well. Did he know how to control the human-faced arachnid? Did he know how to increase his number of believers? He totally did not know. Even if he possessed 10 times the strength he had now, he would still need to personally experience all of the details. He would need to dig from the application all the way down to the base layer in order to put every link in place. It was practically impossible. But once he had the format pyramid of "My Heart's a Prison," everything became easy. All he had to do was tap into the potential of the format pyramid, then supply it with the necessary energy. The high-level applications would then become successful. The current situation was very interesting. Most of Luo Nan's self-format targeted the soul and the mental plane. The effects towards his fleshly body were lacking. The archetype format mobilized the potential of the human body to a very large degree, fully achieving control and application towards every part of the human body. However, Luo Nan could see that its results were mediocre in the mental realm from his various experiences thus far. What was the factor that led to the two theories, which could be said to have stemmed from the same source, to have such a big difference between them appear? Thinking a step further, if he could merge the two together, could he be able to create something that could affect both the mental and the material plane? A highly effective formatting software. Luo Nan was unable to find an answer in this short amount of time, but he recognized one point very clearly. Right now, just touching the software of the archetype format was his only version of experience. He hadn't really formed the archetype format. The cause was very simple. Right now, there was a difference in the stimulation of the archetype format towards the body. It did not matter whether it was the operation of his brain and spinal cord or the arrangement of his 43 cranial and spinal nerves. There existed a discrepancy. Perhaps this discrepancy was big, perhaps it was small. It was between them all and the format of Luo Nan himself. Though the two design philosophies were identical, the details were completely different. They were two different works. They could be compared, but they could not be confused to be the same. What he could currently perceive was just stimuli conferred to him through the VR system. For example, the ice flow of water that endlessly battered against him was just some data model being cast onto his body. Its results were real enough to touch upon a part of his energy, transform it into internal energy reserves, and ignite the format of fire. However, it still fundamentally did not exist. Luo Nan was not dejected though. The archetype format, an alteration of the body that touched upon the deepest levels of the body's mechanisms, was not something that could be casually obtained. Just being able to experience it once had already far exceeded his expectations. Most of Luo Nan's attention was cast upon his body. The external world grew fuzzier under his perception, but there was an understanding, and that understanding was the depth of the waters. Right now, the icy waters were already past his chest, and then his neck. It seemed impossible to carry on walking normally. Luckily, Luo Nan knew how to swim a little and started to half walk and half float. But since the waters were like this, he lost his sense of time and distance. Right now, had he reached the 500-meter mark yet? Right when he sought to find the system confirmation, the space beneath Luo Nan's feet became nothingness. His toes could no longer reach the bottom, and from here henceforth, the depths of the water exceeded his height. This was nothing, but the problem was that the thick rock strata was already within reach. If he were to continue on, it would not be long before the flow of the water would completely submerge this endless cavern, leaving not even a sliver of space behind. Had he reached the second stage? A rumble sounded right when Luo Nan was pondering over how to overcome this juncture. The rocky wall behind him collapsed, and another stream of water came gushing out. The two streams collided against each other, forming a whirlpool with a bizarrely large force. He was drawn into the whirlpool instantly and was fiercely flung and smashed onto the unlevel rocky wall. It smashed him silly on the spot, and his tactical helmet became damaged. A cold stream of water came gushing inside, and the so-called heat network, his so-called armor, was of no use. His consciousness faded, and the world instantly spun all around. Chapter 94, A Bad Mind 1/2. Chapter 94, A Bad Mind 1/2. Translator, Sero. Failed again, however, it is obvious that the difficulty increased. Oh right, this is designed especially for burners. Luo Nan exited the Frost River waterway, not attempting to try it consecutively again. He simply sat on the high-back starship chair and closed his eyes, feeling the discomfort after the stimulation signals left his body. Although there was no more pressure from the rushing cold water, his body still felt like it was a few dozen kilograms heavier. There were coordination problems in various parts of his body. He felt like an old machine that hadn't been oiled. He was a bit stiff between the joints. He also felt muscle pain and cramping from the tearing of some of his muscle fibers. This was all caused by the discrepancy after the separation from the Archetype Format model. The pain that he was experiencing at present was proof that the standards of his body were far from passing. Luo Nan started moving his fingers after a minute and regained control of his body, which had suddenly felt foreign. At this moment, an analysis hologram had risen up in front of his high-back chair, which continuously replayed the success and failing factors of his previous waterway adventure. Luo Nan watched the evaluation out of habit. However, the evaluation was severely harsh and unlike anything he had seen before. As a burner, low-level mistakes that were hard to believe occurred with the basic archetype format. The distribution of internal energy were that of a beginner, and the coordination ability between the body and internal energy were close to zero. It is recommended you immediately test the faults in the format as well as undergo strict basic training and go back to school for reconstruction. I was this bad. Luo Nan touched his head and could not help but laugh despite himself. Perhaps it was because the system went according to the standard of burners and the requirements went up by a lot. After that, a 3D full-body image appeared on the screen. On the image, red and green lights, as well as blue and white lines, formed some close-knit nodes and outlines. The red lights, which represented mistakes, were shockingly eye-catching. Luo Nan found this to be a bit surprising. Even if this was a template selected by the Dynamo Core, why are there so many mistakes? He randomly selected a red light that was located on the chest. This caused quite a few lights that were close to the area to light up as well. Even a group of nodes that were located far away on the leg were affected. It evidently showed a very systematic connection between the two areas. The hologram beside it showed a close-up of the corresponding part and used a clear icon to portray the internal energy as the axis. It also showed the flow, confluence, manifestation, and mutual interference of the relevant energy and information in the special structure of the corresponding body part. Even the direct and indirect effects to nerves, blood vessels, muscle fibers, bones, and internal organs in the material plane were shown. Even though Luo Nan did not understand half of the many models and formulas, but with the basic concept of how energy and information operated, he could make out most of the rest. He looked on in both interest and agony. He had found the source of the problem very quickly. No wonder there were so many mistakes. A lot of the nodes in the archetype format model were affected by the interference of the self-format. It was all jumbled up. Even if Luo Nan deliberately distinguished between virtual and reality, the innate ability that he had continued to rectify for the past 5 years included a sharp increase in his soul's strength and continued to deepen this impression. It was something that could not be easily removed. From the playback system, It could be seen that the archetype format model had already undergone a transformation within half a minute of covering Luo Nan's body. Many key nodes were displaced, and by this time, even the virtual format of fire had yet to be ignited. The strange thing was that at the end, when many nerve wirings were disturbed and distorted, he had actually succeeded in an ignition. What was the reasoning behind this? Luo Nan subconsciously pressed his hand against his lower abdomen. He did not know whether it was due to the heat conduction from his palm, but he could vaguely feel a hint of warmth emitting from this area that would not go away. Well, scary. Luo Nan could not think of an explanation and could only continue to consult the system analysis playback to find the reason. As he watched, he came across a comprehensive, all-around analysis which left him slightly startled. Let alone anything else. Just this error correction system was absolutely unattainable for his family workshop-style format research. With time, it would be very difficult for one not to succeed if one had such a system. This system had its timely and accurate simulation, playback and error correction methods. All one needed on top of that was a little knowledge, talent, and hard work. It was no wonder that within the short span of 5 to 6 years, the number of Deep Blue Walkers were already enough to fill 4 to 5 divisions while it continuously expanded. The archetype formatting theory had indeed skyrocketed after receiving support from capital and political power. It would be next to impossible to counterattack against it in the current social context. As expected, I can only expand my influence in the ability user society. Currently, I have made some progress as a psychic, or perhaps as my identity as scout. However, it's still not enough, far from enough. Luo Nan was a bit distracted and right at this moment, his wristband vibrated. A call came through. It was Mo Qiu. Third brother. Nanster, where are you? Mo Qiu asked straightforwardly. Luo Nan was slightly startled. I'm upstairs. Upstairs where? Forget it, come down now. Actually, Mo Qiu didn't care where Luo Nan was. Having been able to contact him, he let out a long sigh. Come to the guide platform in the waiting lounge. I'll wait for you here. Third brother, what's the matter? Nothing much. Peng 17 just went overboard and had a bit of an extreme reaction. I think it's best to go home early and rest. Come down quickly. Oh, okay. Luo Nan furrowed his brows after the call ended. Third brother Qiu was obviously lying. There was a sense of forced calmness in his voice. He probably didn't want to let a kid like him worry. However, the nervous tension, both within and outside, his words had totally betrayed him. What happened? His brain went into overdrive, and Luo Nan took off his peripheral equipment and exited the VIP room without delay. As the door closed, he remembered that he was invited by Hu Huiying and should let him know that he was leaving, just to be polite. However, he did not get his contact details at the time. Luo Nan shook his head and power-walked towards the elevators. After a short while, he met the two beautiful guides again. Both the long-haired and short-haired guides broke out in a sweet smile at the same time and playfully lifted their hats to him in greeting from a distance. Hi, Chief. Luo Nan responded with a nod and told the two as he got closer. Later, when Senior Hu comes back, please tell him that something came up and I need to leave first. The short-haired guide widened her eyes. You're not going to play for a while longer, Chief Luo. It's not even been an hour. No, something came up. Luo Nan nodded to the two and walked towards the elevator. Seeing that Luo Nan was in a rush, the two guides exchanged glances, then bowed together. We'll be sure to pass on your message. The elevator rang and the door opened to the side. As Luo Nan was about to enter, he saw a group of 4 or 5 people laughing as they exited. They were all drunk, and one of them was Hu Huiying. Chapter 94, A Bad Mind 2/2. Translator, Sero. Luo Nan saw Hu Huiying, and Hu Huiying also saw Luo Nan. His enthusiasm still had not subsided. He immediately staggered forward and clung to Luo Nan. "Junior Nan, what's wrong? Is it not fun playing by yourself? Good thing I brought a group of brothers over. We can all play a match together. Want to play 10 days in the wilderness? Or do you want something even more stimulating?" "No, Senior Hu. Something happened with my friend and he asked me to go down. I'll be leaving first." Luo Nan excused himself politely, not wanting to be involved with the group of drunkards. Hu Huijing blinked. He was still not thinking clearly. "Tell your friend to come here. Everyone's close to one another. Normally we'd play together with Junping." He lifted his hand and was about to introduce each one of his friends. However, Luo Nan grabbed onto his arm, made eye contact and said softly, "No need, Senior, maybe next time." Hu Huiying was suddenly lost for words. He said quite a few times before responding. "Okay then, all right." By this time, the rest of the drunkards in the entrance of the elevator had already sized up Luo Nan. The majority of them were not interested in him and were more interested in the 2 pretty guides instead. Luo Nan nodded in greeting to Hu Huiying again and tilted his body to squeeze past the group. There was a person who stood sluggishly in the middle, most likely stoned from drinking too much. This person staggered after colliding with Luo Nan's shoulder. He widened his eyes and was about to lash out but was dragged to the side, clearing the path. The person who dragged him was not Hu Huiying but another acquaintance. Luo Nan's gaze scanned the area and saw the bespectacled Liu Tao, who looked gentle and quiet. Luo Nan could tell that he was the soberest out of the group. After he saw Luo Nan look over him, Liu Tao gently readjusted his glasses and tilted the corner of his lips in greeting. His expressions were a bit stiff. It seemed as if he had not decided whether to acknowledge him or pretend that they did not know each other. Maybe it was because Liu Tao was not sure whether Luo Nan had recognized him. On the warship that day, his introduction of concepts such as darksider life forms and shadow fog, as well as the less than pleasant encounter at the restaurant 2 days later, had unknowingly left a deep impression on Luo Nan. Luo Nan's impression of him had already surpassed the conflict with Lion Yu and Li Zhucheng. But since he was so torn, Luo Nan decided to just pretend that he did not recognize him. One of Luo Nan's questions had been solved after seeing Liu Tao here. No wonder he was bumping into so many drunkards tonight. As expected of a group of affluent second generations, there were not many people in Xia City who could treat the Frost River reality as a drinking establishment instead of a gaming center. However, Huang Bingzhen was nowhere to be seen. Luo Nan entered the elevator and greeted Hu Huiying with a nod once again. The elevator closed slowly along with the farewells of the beautiful guides. After Liu Tao saw the metal doors of the elevator close and confirmed that Luo Nan could no longer see him, he finally let out a sigh of relief. He had not even been that drunk, but any drunkenness he had escaped along with his breath. He turned his head to ask Hu Huiying what that guy was doing here, but found the latter still waving his hand stupidly at the elevator doors. He cursed inwardly and pondered for a bit. Then he raised his wrist, preparing to contact someone. However, at this moment, a sound rang out, and the elevator doors that had just closed suddenly opened again. Luo Nan was by himself in the carriage that should have gone down. His gaze swept across the faces of the drunkards outside the elevator. Liu Tao's heart started to beat rapidly, and his raised wrist froze in place. Luo Nan's gaze eventually landed on Hu Huiying as he broke into a shallow smile. He raised his wrist, stepping forward. "Senior Hu, give me your contact details." Hu Huiying was baffled and slapped his own head after hearing Luo Nan's words. "Ah, my brain. Come, 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 add me as a friend. In school, you should contact me often about anything in the future." The two touched wrists and added each other as friends on their wristbands. Hu Huiying had graciously accepted Luo Nan's intentions and patted him on the shoulder quite a few times. Luo Nan smiled in acceptance and idly withdrew from him. His gaze swept across the group once again and ineffably landed on Liu Tao's face. At this moment, Liu Tao looked straight into Luo Nan's eyes. As his gaze met the unclear irises, Liu Tao's heart seemed to have stopped abruptly. He clearly knew that his reaction was too obvious and wanted to show a more natural pose. However, how could one control the instinctive responses of the body? Liu Tao did not know what his expression looked like. He could only see that Luo Nan's gaze was locked onto his face. The smile that was sent to Hu Huiying was still in place. However, he felt that something was not right. Luo Nan's looked down after approximately half a second. It was as if Luo Nan's eyes carried a magnetic force as Liu Tao also looked down, only to see his raised arm. He instantly retracted said arm as if he had touched burning red metal, letting it hit his own chest. This downright horrible reaction was met with Luo Nan's unwavering voice. "Senior Liu, could you add me as well?" Oh, okay." Liu Tao did not even know what he said, and watched as Luo Nan moved his arm forward. He also rigidly moved his shoulder forward like a marionette. A gentle vibration indicated that the two had successfully added each other. On the other side, Hu Huiying snapped out of his daze and mumbled, "You guys know each other." Having heard this question, Liu Tao froze on the spot as if he had been struck by lightning. However, Luo Nan acted as though nothing out of the ordinary had happened and backed into the elevator. He simply responded, "I met him a few times last week. See you seniors." The elevator doors closed again, and the numbers indicated that the carriage had gone down. At this moment, the three others that Luo Nan had ignored started to snap out of their daze. They were both baffled and annoyed. Someone even said, "This guy's quite arrogant, huh? Who does he think he is?" Liu Tao did not listen to Hu Huiying's response to his friend as he was caught in a trance. He lifted his wrist, and Luo Nan's name was still displayed on the contact's interface. Scrolling back a bit, there was the person he was trying to contact just now. At this very moment, the extremely light wristband seemed to be crushing his wrist. No, no, no. Honestly, that guy is nothing special. In order to get rid of this laughable pressure, Liu Tao thought back with all his might to the restaurant last week, thinking of how embarrassed Luo Nan looked after being casually roasted by Yan Yongbo. However, all the images eventually returned to the otherworldly cold colors deep within Luo Nan's slightly motley eyes. He felt as if he was suffocating. Liu Tao could not help but hit his head hard. "Crap, what's wrong with my brain? You think you're so smart, huh? Taoster, what are you doing?" Hu Huijing looked baffled. "I didn't know that you knew Luo Nan. Did you guys also meet through Brother Ping?" Liu Tao opened his mouth, but did not know how to respond. After that, he raised his wrist again, and the contacts on the screen scrolled up and down along with his eye movements, flipping between two names. While he meandered about, one of the names suddenly enlarged. as if filling up his entire eye socket. Huang Bingzhen. The call connected. The idiot with half a brain scattered and the other half full of hallucinogens slurred. Tauster, come quickly. Come everyone, I'll let you all experience what supernatural power is. Chapter 95. A Small Exchange 1/2. Translator, Strivon. As Luo Nan walked out of the elevator, he raised his arm to look at his wristband. The friend he had just added did not respond yet, but this was very normal. He was not counting on this little bit of a psychological hint to force the rather scheming Liu Tao into complete submission. The human body's various neurons and neurotransmitters were encoded and encrypted by carriers of the material plane. In the case of Jack, it was absolutely impossible for a glance of eye contact to see through all of his thoughts and even all influences on emotions. Besides, Luo Nan did not even have his most capable wraith sign by his side. However, it was not very difficult to see through a target's approximate emotional trend, especially when the target harbored quite a malicious intent. Luo Nan had not paid particular attention to Liu Tao at the beginning. He could only blame Liu Tao's own lack of confidence for the series of actions that gave off a transparently awkward vibe. Most particularly was when the elevator door closed the first time. Liu Tao appeared to have had a load off his mind. He certainly would not know that Luo Nan did not need to use his eyes to observe him at all. What followed just required a simple bit of logic. Luo Nan thought back to the moments after the conflict with Huang Bingzhen. Liu Tao had perfectly avoided being seen. Then he showed himself to Huang Bingzhen afterwards. Most likely, Liu Tao had discovered Luo Nan and had hidden to the side to spy on them. Whether it was to help Huang Bingzhen vent some anger or for some other objective, Liu Tao had undoubtedly acted with ill intent. So logically and naturally, Luo Nan gave Liu Tao a bit of a psychological hint. Under the overwhelming dominance of the mental plane, the aftermath caused by this little bit of a psychological hint would be determined by Liu Tao himself. Luo Nan went against the flow of people to enter the reception hall. He found Mo Qiu with great precision among the dazzling silhouettes of people and virtual figures. Just as he said, Mo Qiu was waiting in front of the guide stand of the reception hall. However, something was outside of Luo Nan's expectations. This third brother was actually by himself. There was no one next to him. There was not even a trace of his target of the meetup, Tianxi. Luo Nan squeezed out from the crowd and spoke out in greeting. "Third brother, where's Mo Peng and the others?" Mo Qiu did not answer directly and just adopted a calm expression. "Nanster, you're here. Let's keep on waiting. Mo Rui, Mo Han will be here in a bit." This time, Luo Nan was not in the mood to go beating around the bush with him. He asked directly, "Did something happen with Mo Peng and the others? Did someone get offended and a fight happened?" As soon as these brief words were uttered, Luo Nan was able to see shock in Mo Qiu's expression. Luo Nan confirmed that he had hit the bull's eye. Mo Qiu's first reaction was, "Mo Peng got in contact with you." Luo Nan spread his hands. "I was just guessing." Right now, Luo Nan's mature behavior made Mo Qiu more or less overlook Luo Nan's age. He also forgot to maintain the calm and comforting demeanor of an elder brother he had constantly tried to portray and unconsciously sighed. Actually, Mo Qiu felt quite wronged. He really did not know too much about the situation. Mo Qiu and Tian Si were loitering around Area C and chatting when the situation occurred. They were already a bit too late by the time news had gotten over. It seemed like Mo Cheng's battle team was provoked when they were practicing their skills. The two sides faced off in virtual reality, but things became serious. Both sides had people get kicked offline due to the excessive BMing. Otherwise, it would have turned into a real fist fight. This was nothing really. In competitive games, BMing and challenging were part of the game. In circumstances of high immersion, when someone was unable to hold back their anger, virtual duels would become real PKs. This was a very common occurrence in a community full of young and vigorous people. Generally speaking, a large amusement center like Frost River Reality would always have the appropriate control measures in order to prevent the situation from worsening. However, today was just a bad day. By the time Mo Qiu got wind of the news and made his way over, people who were not even part of the battle team and did not really do anything to instigate things, like Mo Tao, Mo Peng, and even Tian Kai were all drawn in. Things really did turn into a big brawl. The situation suddenly went out of control. The public order monitoring system captured the scene and automatically reported it to the police. This was now something that could not be suppressed by Frost River Reality, no matter how much they wished to. The Sentinel bots arrived at the scene and pointed their riot guns, knocking out the group of youngsters, putting them on the ground instantly. They were lifted into police cars in just a few minutes. These police cars were parked outside right now. Even the police were shocked. Did young people really make such a big scene? Huang Bingzhen's face flashed in Luo Nan's mind. Then came Liu Tao's face. He felt this was a case of leveraging power, an easy way to pluck oneself out from a situation. This seemed to be something that Liu Tao would do. Of course, this was only speculation. Mo Qiu's train of thought ran a bit further. He noticed that the people who provoked them looked like thugs. He was afraid that a society gang had gotten involved. His first priority was to gather up a few of his companions within the amusement center and ensure their safety. In any case, this night was bound to be quite a terrible night. At this time, Mo Rui, Mo Han, and Chen Xiaolin came over in a haste. The three of them had been playing the game, the Uncanny Valley, and were not part of the majority of the group. They were able to avoid the conflict. On the other hand, Chen Xiaolin, who was one to play with the boys, had participated in the brawl. Thus, she was also taken aboard a police car. Mo Qiu got quite the headache when he saw Chen Xiaolin come closer. He did not know how to explain the situation to her and comfort her. Things were bad either way. In the end, Mo Qiu was forced to explain the situation to the girls, but the reactions of these girls more or less exceeded his expectations. Mo Rui was relatively quiet, and that was okay, but Mo Han instantly jumped. It has to be that Huang Bingzhen. That bastard is a good-for-nothing no matter how you look at him. He had people get revenge for him. She had first thought of that trash in an instant. It seemed that Mo Han's mental scar of Huang Bingzhen's hug was very large. Chen Xiaolin's expression grew even calmer. She did not grow distressed when she heard that her sister had been detained and instead asked, "Have they determined which party is responsible? All they know is that the other guys started provoking them." Mo Qiu felt helpless when he spoke these words. Which police department are they going to be taken to? This I'll ask. Right now, Tianxi was looking over matters on the police side of things. After Mo Qiu called to get information, he discovered very awkwardly that his current way of handling things had been crushed by Chen Xiaolin, who was only a 16, 17-year-old girl. Awkwardness was just awkwardness. It did not prevent Mo Qiu from obtaining the definite information. It's the Fudong Department branch. It's being handled nearby. Chen Xiaolin nodded and turned to face Luo Nan. Lista's dad works for the city department. He's quite familiar with the people in charge. Oh right, Lista was making his way over here in a hurry. Luo Nan did not say a word. He just raised his hand towards Chen Xiaolin, indicating to her that too many people worrying about the same thing was bad. These sort of things should be communicated to people who were more familiar with police matters. However, Luo Nan's was shaking his head in his mind as well when he saw Chen Xiaolin's calm expression when she mentioned Zhu Lei. He did not believe that this exchange would be able to save any part of their relationship. Chen Xiaolin did not refuse. She walked to the side to talk with Zhu Lei. Luo Nan sighed again. Huang Bingzhen's face flashed in his mind once again. Would that rude fellow really be satisfied with this superficial revenge? That's a wrap for this installment. Thank you all for watching and supporting Lord of the Stories. If you enjoyed this tale, please hit the like button, share it, and subscribe for more amazing stories. You can also explore other series updated daily in our playlists. Have a fantastic day and see you in the next episode.